Welcome to the Retirement Made Easy podcast. I'm your host, Gregg Gonzalez. My goal for the podcast is to help you live a better life in retirement by giving you the tools and information you need in a language that you can understand. I'm lucky enough to be a financial advisor and retirement planner in St. Louis, Missouri, with clients in almost 20 different states. I can't wait till the day when I can come on the podcast and say we have clients in 50 different states. I think that would be really neat, but we're not there yet. A lot of podcast listeners have reached out for help with questions regarding their own retirement, and some have even become clients. They've gone on to our website, retirementmadeeasypodcast.com. If you're curious, you can click on Work with Gregg, schedule a phone call, and we can talk about the questions you have and get you some help when it comes to your own retirement. So with that being said, many people have visited the website, retirementmadeeasypodcast.com. So this episode at the end, I'm going to go over some of the love mail and the hate mail, just two different emails that we got recently. That'll be kind of fun to read on the podcast. I love hearing from all the listeners with questions or comments, concerns, and even the hate mail sometimes I look at as constructive criticism. So that's always helpful and interesting to hear from people. But on today's podcast, I wanted to talk about what we can learn from Dave Ramsey and some of his principles when it comes to retirement planning and investing and building wealth for retirement. Many people know that I'm a SmartVestor Pro. A lot of people find me on Dave Ramsey's website because they know that I kind of subscribe to his philosophies, and he and I are in agreement to so many different financial principles that help people build wealth and make good financial choices in their lives. And that's what it's all about. So on today's episode, we're going to talk about what we can all learn from Dave Ramsey. And I'm calling that segment the 5 lessons we can all take from Dave Ramsey or learn from Dave Ramsey. And then in the next segment of the show, like I said, we'll get into the listener feedback, the love mail, the hate mail. So the second part of the show will be fun for me. I get to answer one of my critics on the podcast today. So sit back and enjoy another episode of the Retirement Made Easy podcast. And again, check out our website, retirementmadeeasypodcast.com. Check out all of our resources that are available to you under the resources tab, as well as you can listen to previous episodes right there on the website. So check that out. Or better yet, send me your questions. At the bottom of the website, it says, Ask Gregg a question. It doesn't matter what it is. If I can help, I certainly will. So let's get into today's episode, which is the 5 lessons we can all learn from Dave Ramsey. Lesson number 1 that I wanted to talk about was the number 1 rule that Dave Ramsey has for building wealth. Dave calls this the number 1 indicator of people who retire wealthy. He even did a YouTube video about this, number 1 indicator of people who retire wealthy. Check that out. And Dave is very research-based. He uses a lot of data that's out there and a lot of studies that have been done to support what he believes. And one of the studies that he talks about was done by the administrators and retirement plan professionals to determine what are the big indicators that lead someone to retire and build wealth. And just thinking out loud, what are the indicators? Is it that someone invests in mutual funds and another person invests in bonds or CDs or keeps their money in the money market at the bank? What are the factors that go into and are attributed to building wealth and lasting financial security? And the number 1 indicator ended up being how much and how frequently someone saves or invests for retirement. And Dave always recommends that people invest 15% of their gross annual income. So if you make $100,000, he is going to tell you to save 15% or $15,000 for retirement each year. And what's so interesting about this study and many studies is 74% of indication was attributed to the savings rate and the amount and consistency that one saves and invests for retirement. And think about that. Of all the indicators of retiring with wealth, savings rate is number 1. Below that is maybe rate of return and the costs and maybe expenses of the investments and all the other things that people talk about. But 74% of the indication of someone retiring with wealth is actually just the savings rate. Just do it. Just save 15%, like Dave says. Now, it's not 15% minus the match that maybe your employer has. Let's say your match is 4% and then you would save 11%. No, Dave says save the full 15% of your gross pay, not your take-home pay. And he will tell you, make sure that your debt, all your debt is paid off besides your mortgage. Make sure you have an emergency fund, which is for emergencies of 3 to 6 months of living expenses, and then save consistently 15% of your gross income every year. Dave says if he's going to help people retire wealthy, the best thing, the number one thing he can do is try to convince people to save money for retirement. He recommends 15%. So that's lesson number one. Lesson number two is what I like to call stick with the basics. Whereas so many people end up getting distracted and chasing the next shiny object and the next hot thing, whether it's Bitcoin or some cryptocurrency or gold or some other investment or get-rich scheme. Dave Ramsey will tell you to stick with the basics. Stick with growth mutual funds. Don't try to reinvent the wheel. Don't try to get lucky with some speculative investment. Stick with proven success methods. In fact, Dave Ramsey did the largest study of millionaires in this country, and 80% of those people that were millionaires in this study said that their primary investment or retirement savings vehicle they used was a 401k or employer-sponsored retirement plan. That's what over 80% of the people in the study were doing with their money. They were investing it in mutual funds inside of something like a 401k. So if this national study of millionaires is showing us that over 80% of people are doing this as their primary retirement savings vehicle for building the majority of their wealth, if not all of their wealth, then why would you try to do something different? Dave Ramsey thinks that it makes sense to just kind of follow the herd and do what the successful people are doing that are building wealth. So rule number 2, stick with the basics. Growth mutual funds inside of your company retirement plan. Please don't try to get fancy. Listen to Dave. Lesson number 3 is stay away from credit card debt. Please stay away from credit card debt. His largest study of millionaires ever conducted in this country was just conducted 3 years ago in 2017. They wrapped it up. They found that 40% of the general population of people in this survey had outstanding credit card balances. 40% of the population out there has outstanding credit card balances where they're paying 10, 15, 20% interest to some credit card company. That is absolutely outrageous. But what was really, really interesting to me was of all the millionaires they surveyed, only 6% of them had outstanding credit card debt. The millionaires are obviously doing something right and getting them paid off, or they don't even use credit cards to begin with. And I'm going to go on down a little side road here real quick. A lot of people say, why does Dave Ramsey hate credit cards? Credit cards can give you free points and free interest. They can even help you build credit if used properly. And if you pay them off every month, you won't pay any interest or fees at all. In theory, that all sounds great, but what actually happens if you look at the studies of behavior on personal finance? We just showed you, I just told you, 40% of the general population in this country doesn't use credit cards properly. 40% carry a credit card balance and they're paying 10, 20, even 25% on these credit cards. That kind of interest is crazy. So the fact of the matter is, Dave Ramsey is never going to recommend anyone utilize a credit card because people naturally have an inclination to not pay off credit card debt and they end up hurting themselves and paying this outrageous interest. And they just keep kicking the can down the road and they never get the credit card debt paid off and it just continues to snowball and get out of control. That's why Dave Ramsey does not recommend anyone use a credit card. And quite frankly, I would agree with him because I have seen so many people with tens of thousands of dollars in credit card debt. It is an uphill battle getting those things paid off when the interest is accruing at 15, 20, 25%. So rule number 3 again, avoid credit card debt. Rule number 4, if you want to win with money, you have to be intentional. Dave Ramsey offers a free tool called EveryDollar. It is a free budgeting app that's available. Check it out, daveramsey.com. And of course, Dave Ramsey's going to tell you to stick to a budget so you know where your money's going and you're telling it where it's going. It's the same reason why in Dave Ramsey's study of millionaires, largest study ever that I've continued to quote, almost 90% of the millionaires in the study, when they went into a grocery store, they shopped off of a grocery list, whereas the non-millionaires did not stick with a grocery list and just kind of bought things in aisle to aisle. And they wound up with a grocery bill that was outrageous because they were not intentional and they were not disciplined in something as simple as grocery shopping. And that carries over to so many parts of our life as well. Dave Ramsey will tell you to build sinking funds. We talk about these on the podcast as well. For example, if you're saving up for that new used car purchase or the vacation, the summer vacation, we advise people to save up in what's called a sinking fund. So the funds are available when the time comes for that purchase of the vehicle or for the trip. We've got cash set aside that we can pay for out of pocket and not putting it on the credit card or going into debt for a car loan or something like that. That's what intentionality is all about. Dave Ramsey's always going to tell you to pay cash for that car. I do as well. So lesson number 4 is be intentional and be disciplined. Check out his EveryDollar budgeting app. It's free on the website, daveramsey.com. I even have a budgeting tool available on my website, retirementmadeeasypodcast.com. It's under the resources. It's very simple, but it works excellent. And lesson number 5, last but not least, live like no one else so you can live like no one else. He has said that over and over and over. It's in virtually all of his books. Live like no one else so one day you can live and give like no one else. What does he mean by that? I think what he's trying to say is live below your means and learn how to be happy living below your means. Put a plan in for the future, saving and investing and stay out of debt. That's all part of your plan. And then one day, if your plan comes true and you stick to your plan and stay disciplined, one day you'll wake up and be able to see all of the wealth that you've been able to build and look back at all of the time and work and sacrifice and living below your means and not having the new fancy car every year, right? Or every 3 years. And best of all, you'll be debt-free and your wealth will be able to carry you for the next 30, 40 years and even help generations to come. And that's what the giving is all about. Being able to accomplish any and all charitable goals that you have, and then making sure that your kids and loved ones are well taken care of as well. So again, lesson number 5, live like no one else so one day you can live and give like no one else. Dave Ramsey's a super guy. He's even got the number 2 nationally syndicated radio show in the country. Now that Rush Limbaugh, we lost him. He had passed away recently. Sean Hannity, I believe, is number 1. So Dave Ramsey is in the number 2 spot. So you can check out his podcast, his radio show as well. As a SmartVestor Pro, I'm very familiar with his website and all the resources he has available. So I always encourage folks to go to his website, daveramsey.com. Now, the second segment of the show, I wanted to jump into some of the love mail, the hate mail. I'll go into 2 emails that I got from listeners over the past 2 weeks. So first off, I will read from Jerry some love mail or a compliment, which I appreciate. But then secondly, I will jump into the hate mail, which is from John, and that'll be interesting as well. So let me go ahead and just read off the email. And before I forget, if you have comments or questions, they may be about your own retirement and they may be about the podcast in general, go to my website, retirementmadeeasypodcast.com. At the bottom, it says, Ask Gregg a question. You can submit your love mail, hate mail, questions, comments, all the above right there. I'd love to hear from you. I look at the hate mail as constructive criticism, so no hard feelings. I've got thick skin here, so. The first message is from Jerry. He says, Gregg, I enjoy the podcast. I just wanted to send you a quick note thanking you for offering your free couples blueprint to a dream retirement. I downloaded it on your website. Yes, it's available for all those that haven't seen it. Go to the resources tab on our website and you can download the Couple's Guide to a Dream Retirement. Me and my wife have been working on this together, and it has not only gotten us more excited for retirement, but it also seems to have brought us closer together. And we aren't even finished yet. Thanks again, Jerry. So Jerry, that was very nice. Thank you. I'm glad that resource, I spent a lot of time on that. The Couple's Guide to a Dream Retirement. I promise you, listeners, if you complete this with your spouse, it will have more significance and meaning to the next 10 years of your life than anything else that you do. I promise you. So check that out. It's the Couple's Guide to a Dream Retirement on my website, retirementmadeeasypodcast.com. This melted my heart reading this, that Jerry and his spouse had taken the time to start completing this and working on it together. It is absolutely fantastic to hear that. I'm so happy that he was able to find it there on the website. So many of our clients have gone through this exercise together, and the change and positive influence that it's had not only in their marriage, but also in their future and their family's future is just incredible. So check that out on our website, Couple's Guide to a Dream Retirement. It's free. And to be honest, it's something that my business coach and my life coach actually helped me develop. So very, very valuable resource that's right there on the website. All right, next up is John. John sent in his message. This is the hate mail, somewhat. I look at it as constructive criticism. It says, Gregg, you mentioned on the podcast that listeners can send you questions or comments. So here I go. I wanted to tell you that I am disappointed you are not more specific about your investment recommendations on your podcast. Why don't you just tell us how you would recommend an average 65-year-old invest their retirement account? Tell us specific stocks and mutual funds you would use. The more specific, the better! ! Oh, and I think you talk too fast. Thanks, John. Well, John, I do appreciate your message, and there is a reason for that. Why I don't give specific mutual fund tips or stock recommendations just over the air. Couple reasons for that. Number one, it's compliance. It's a legal issue. So anyone you hear giving stock advice, specific stock advice or mutual fund advice to the general public, they're not securities licensed. They're not licensed financial advisors, right? They don't have any designations. So in a lot of cases, you're listening to a fool or someone who has an opinion. And the reason why we as financial advisors, I'm a fiduciary, certified financial planner, I can't give specific security recommendations like mutual funds, stocks, ETFs out to a wide audience because there may be a bunch of 65-year-olds out there, but that doesn't mean that their portfolio should be exactly the same. Every 65-year-old should have a portfolio that's aligned with their goals that they want to accomplish and their risk tolerance and things like that. We can't just give a cookie cutter portfolio recommendation out that every 65-year-old should follow. If you want a cookie cutter portfolio, what I would say is there's a green investment company out there that offers cookie cutter portfolios, meaning every 65-year-old gets the same exact thing. So that's not how I operate. It's not how fiduciaries should operate. I like to recommend a tailored portfolio depending on someone's unique circumstances, right? I mean, that would be like me going to a doctor and saying, hey, doc, for a 65-year-old male, what medication should I be taking? What medications are right for me? The doctor would look at me like I had two heads. He would say, okay, well, what's wrong with you? What's your general health like? What medicines may you be allergic to? All kinds of different things, right? Like, do you have arthritis? What's your blood pressure like? The doctor would have so many different questions back at me to determine what's suitable for me, because you can't just prescribe just general medications that 65-year-old males should all be taking. It just doesn't work like that. So I hope that helps, John. I am sorry I can't give more specific portfolio holdings, I guess, over the air. I think it really would do more harm than good, in my personal opinion. And there's a lot of these investments that I might recommend for someone that the general public wouldn't be able to get on their own or utilize on their own without working with a financial advisor. It's kind of like if I wanted an antibiotic, I have to get a prescription for that. I have to go to the doctor for that antibiotic. There's only so many medications that are over the counter. I hope that I answered your question, John. And again, I apologize. I wish things were different, but we want to be fair to everybody and we want to provide information and wisdom that we can pass on to help other people. That's the point of the podcast. I don't want to steer anybody in the wrong direction or give bad investment advice over the air, certainly. Your other comment or the constructive criticism was that I talk too fast. And I appreciate that, actually. I will make a note to work on that. So, John, appreciate you listening to the Retirement Made Easy podcast. God bless you. And remember, everyone, always dream big. The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which investments may be appropriate for you, please consult your attorney, tax advisor, or financial advisor prior to investing. This is a hypothetical example and is not representative of any specific investment. Your results may vary. All performance referenced is historical and is no guarantee of future results. All indices mentioned are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. The SmartVestor program is a directory of investment professionals. Neither Dave Ramsey nor SmartVestor are affiliates of St. Louis Retirement Advisors or LPL Financial. There is no guarantee that a diversified portfolio will enhance overall returns or outperform a non-diversified portfolio. Diversification does not protect against market risk. All investing involves risk, including loss of principal. No strategy assures success or protects against loss. Securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor, member FINRA, SIPC.